What's up, Slappers? Coming to you with another great video on TinkerCAD information. So let's take a look at these different functions today. We're looking at group, hole, align, and mirror. So I'm going to show you how to use these, a couple tips and tricks that I've used over time, just to make it a little bit easier on you as you go through using TinkerCAD. So we already know that the group function is up here. There is also a hotkey for it, Control G, and then there is an ungroup function to separate the objects that you group that you might not want together, Control Shift G. So I'm just going to drag a box out here. I'm going to drag a cylinder out here. And say I wanted to make this almost look like a finger. I can actually take this cylinder, I could put it right onto that box, and I could place these together. Now I need to select both the box and the cylinder to make sure that they are going to group. There's a couple ways to do this. You can click, drag, and highlight both the objects, or you could select one, hold shift, and then select the other object. And now both those objects are selected and my group function shows up. So I could click group, and what will happen is when you don't have objects grouped and you pull new objects out here, it's going to make them a different color, okay? So you know they're not in a group. When I group these objects, it's going to make them one single color, and it's going to make their dimensions the same. So what that means is I can no longer individually dimension the cylinder. So I'm going to click group, puts those two objects together. I could lower this down. I could make it smaller. I could add, oh, that's the other thing. It doesn't allow you to change if I wanted to chamfer or bevel this edge now. So I would have to ungroup this, go back into just my box, and then add a radius to that to get that edge that I would want if I were making a finger. I would also make sure that this has all its sides, and then I could add a bevel to this. It's not going to look the greatest, but it's going to look something like a finger. It's kind of hard to see it in that color. If I want to change the color, make it easier to see, I just click this solid object, and then I could change it to a different color. It's hard to see in every color. Jesus. Oh my God. Well, you guys get the idea. That is how we group objects together. Now we could ungroup them, and we could make them their own objects. We could click off, and we could drag it off. Now let's look at the hole function, okay? So say I wanted to make this box fit around something, or if I wanted like a crescent in here. I could take this cylinder, I could make it a little bit bigger than the box. I could drag it in here, and I can't really see what's going on and what I'm really going to cut out. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger than the box, so I know how much I'm cutting off of it. And as I move this up, it's going to show me how much. And now once I'm there, I could change this to a hole. In order to do this, I could either select hole, or you could hit H on your keyboard and it'll change that object to the hole function. H on the keyboard is an easy way to do it. You could switch back to solid by hitting S. So you could switch back and forth. Or you could just click them up here if you're getting used to all your hotkeys. Once it's a hole, I could select those two objects and I could group them together. And what it's going to do is it's going to cut out a hole there. Now it did leave that bottom edge down there because I did have that chamfer. If I undo that, I could get rid of that bevel. And now what's going to happen is when I group them, it'll just cut it fully. Hole function is one of the most used functions in TinkerCAD. It allows us to do things that make our lives easier and make sure that we do them correctly. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because we're going to align something here. So let's get rid of this. Let's make a coaster. Let's say we want a nice little coaster. So most coasters, I usually work in inches because I'm from the US. So I'm going to go down here to settings, change my units to inches. Okay. And now once I have that, in order to see all of it, we know we have to drag our ruler out here. I'm going to drag that out. And now I can see my inches. Okay. So I'm going to make this a 3-inch by 3-inch coaster for my drink. Most coasters are 1/8 of an inch thick. So that's 0.125. But I'm going to make this 0.25 because I'm going to cut out into the coaster also. So I make it 1/4 of an inch. And then I could see it's got a jagged edge here. That's because I haven't set my sides yet. I'm going to turn my sides all the way up and smooth that out. Now, once I have this, I'm going to use the align function to get my hole right in the center. This is a great looking coaster, right? It's just a solid piece and you could be like, oh, that's awesome. But realistically, you want your drink to fit inside here. So I'm going to copy and paste this object. You could use duplicate, Control D to do that. And what it did is it just made an object on top of it. So if I move it over, you guys could see it's the same object. I'm going to bring it back over there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Shift Alt. And I'm going to move the object in. So all the sides should have came in on that object. So it went in 1/4 of an inch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to a hole. I'm going to hit H on my keyboard. And now I'm going to bring this up a little bit on the work plane. So just a little bit. Now that hole should, let's look down here, should be cutting it out. And you can see how far down it's cutting by looking at this measurement right here, which is about 1/4 of an inch, but you could see that that's the full length of the object. So this moved up about 1/8 of an inch. And now I could actually highlight all of this. I could group it, and that gives me a nice looking coaster. Now, if I didn't have the way we made it, if I didn't have the way to make this object smaller and then just align it directly in the center of it, I could use the align function. So let's look at that real quick. So we have two objects. I want this object to be in the center of here. I'm going to actually raise this up to make this a little easier so I could see both objects. I'm just going to raise it just 1/8 of an inch. And now I'm going to align these objects so this is centered here. I'm going to change it to a hole so I could see a little bit better. And I'm going to highlight both objects now. I'm going to use the align function, which has the hotkey L. And now it gives me all of these different options. And the great thing about TinkerCAD is it's going to show you how it's going to align it when you hover over that object. So if I want to align them center, I could click this button and then click this button over here. It doesn't matter which way you go, but you could see some of the alignments. This will align it to the right side of that object. This will align both the centers, left side of that object, and then here's our heights, different heights that we would align. So I'm just going to center this object on here. I'm going to click center. Okay. So this grays out because I'm already aligned both centers. Okay. And now I look down here and it looks like our object is in the right place. I could highlight both of them and group them now. And that is perfect. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some text here. I'm going to drag text out. I'm going to type in here DIY, type in this text box, DIY slaps, make this smaller so I can make my, put this into my coaster and put that right in the center. And the best way to do this is to align it. So I'm going to highlight both objects. I'm going to do the align function again. I'm going to hit middle and I'm going to hit middle and that align that in the middle. Then I'm going to take this object and I'm going to make sure that it's not on our work plane. You guys can see it's on our work plane right here. I'm going to pull it up 1/8 of an inch. Okay, but that's not going to go through here. So I want to bring this down a little bit, not much, but just enough that it's going to make it look good on there and allow it to emboss inside of my coaster. Bring that down. I'm going to change my language, make it a little smoother. Let's go sans mono. That sounds good. I'm going to lower this height down a little bit so it's not as crazy looking in my design. And then I'm going to change this to a hole. That's going to cut into my object once I group these. So I'm going to highlight my coaster and my text. I'm going to group them together. And now I have text in the middle of my coaster. That doesn't really look good. And that's probably just because of my actual text choice. I'm going to go multilingual. Spread it out a little more. Maybe make it a little bigger. That might allow me to get a better 3D print. Yeah, it looks a lot better. DIY slabs. Boom! Yeah, so we got our coaster. Now, if I wanted to mirror this, if I wanted this DIY slabs text to be backwards, if I was putting this on the bottom or something like that, that's where my mirror function comes in. So all I'm going to do is select my text, select mirror, and it asks me which way do you want to mirror it, up to down. This is top and bottom, or do I want to mirror it left to right? If I mirror it left to right, makes it backwards, and that would be great if I was putting it on the bottom or making my logo on the bottom, and then I could go back and I could group these together. Perfect, okay? If this was a bottom logo, or I was embossing a product I'm making or something like that, this would be perfect. I hope you learned something in this video, and I will see you in the next one.